All right, welcome to Top Tech Heroes, everybody. This is night
Hi.
5 of our set review of Battle for Power set review.
Good evening.
Is it my turn or
I think,
yours?
well, Tengu Man is an odd numbered card, so it's your turn to start.
All right, so we've got getting near the home stretch here. We've got 35 more cards. We're gonna try to get through these in 2 nights. Tengu Man first up is a 6 hand size, 27 vitality character, 6 difficulty, 6 control, 0 mid block, normal character stuff. He's got air, life, and water. I feel like these are symbols that we've seen before. It's Zhonghua. Oh man. And he has 2 abilities, pretty spicy. He has E commit. Your attack gets plus X speed and plus X damage. Well, X is damage then speed. And X is 4 minus the lowest control on a card in your discard pile. And response, discard 1 card. After you check a 2, that check gets plus 2, or check a 1, sorry. That check gets plus 2, playable while committed. So yeah, this is a character that wants you to play 1 checks, and he says, the big problem with 1 checks, when you check them, you tend to end your turn and have nothing left to show for it. Whatever that check is just gone forever. Tengu Man says you get to have a 3, but you have to lose cards in your hands. You have to put yourself behind on cards, and this ability is really it's got a really powerful upside to it, where you get to just play incredibly crushing attacks, and most times when you have an attack string, it's only like 3 or 4 cards long. And if you get to play these insane like 4 mid 6 stun 3 multiple ones, um, or any other really insanely powerful, worthwhile 1 check attack that you could play as in a deck that doesn't have this ability, you might be able to overwhelm your opponent just with the sheer power of your attacks. And we've seen this +3 speed, +3 damage kind of effect before in Mai, and I mean almost had like that ability alone almost makes the character playable. It's quite potent. What do you think of Tengu Man's
Yeah, and
thoughts?
Jasco Games, in their history so far, really have made some very powerful one-shot cards. And unfortunately, I don't think Righteousness and Curse Corruption will be coming back anytime soon. But they do design one-checks typically in a way that they're extremely impactful on the game. And a lot of times, if you're able to resolve and play multiple one-checks, you're probably going to win. And so, but the downside to one checks has always been if you check a one especially on like turn 1 or 2, you're just going to lose.
Yep.
And I think Tengu Man puts you in a position where one just isn't as devastating.
Yeah, like the
And
the old thing with 1 checks was that sometimes you would check a 1 on turn 1, you'd fail your whole build, and then if your opponent gave you some time, you'd draw into 2 more copies of the same 1 check, and you'd be able to claw your way back. And I think that's what you might see with Tengu Man too.
mhm. He has. Let's move on to his action,
Yeah.
which is Feel My Power. It's a 3/4 with a +1 mid block ultra rare action with air, life, and water. It says enhance. Both players' next check to play a card this turn is a 6. No check necessary, and then draw 2 cards. So, I'm seeing a theme across a lot of the actions in this set where you get to draw 2 cards, which drawing cards is always great, especially in Tengu Man. If he checks a 1, he's going to be pitching his cards to, get +2 to his check. Having more cards in your hand is really good because he does start at 6 hand size. And then both players' next check to play a card this turn is a 6 is really good because you don't have to worry about checking a 6. And there's ways off of life to force your opponent to make a control check to burn their 6 away.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh Man support.
Yeah, that's a hilarious and truly wonderful interaction. One case I imagined with this card, just I like this card a lot. I think one cool thing you can do with it is just on like turn 1, you get a kind of a bad hand with one of these. You just play your foundations, try to play this on a 5. If you get the 5, great. Maybe you'll draw into another foundation to play. If you don't, whatever. It's no big deal that you lost
Cameron
it.
Broberg, this is an enhance.
Oh shit. Okay. Ooh, that's spicy. That changes things a lot, actually. Man, I thought this was a form.
No, it's an enhance, which I think makes it a little better.
And here you just read the card off. Yeah, so I would be worried to ever play this on my opponent's turn, I think. It's kind of scary to just let them give them carte blanche to pass their next control check. Um,
Yeah,
but at the
unless
same
you can
time, drawing
force
two
them
cards.
to make a check.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah. The combo with Fear of Women or Pharaoh Man himself is just now completely out of control. Like
Egyptian pyramid.
that's where you want to be with this card for sure.
Hmm.
All right, it's a much sweeter card than I thought it was, and the 3 difficulty changes context a lot there too.
Yeah.
Right. Oh man, actually, this card is awesome in Proto Man. Ooh, I really like this in Proto
Yeah,
Man.
yeah, that is pretty good in Proto Man. I like that a lot.
Because you just get to turn this into a draw two, and then your next card is at normal progressive difficulty, and you're just up cards. It's a good use of that
Hmm.
ability. Anyway, moving on. We've got Kamaitachi. And this is a attack out of so it's got Tengu Man symbols, a 2 high block, 5 difficulty, 3 control, 4 speed mid for 5, 3 keywords: desperation 4, safe, and ranged. And it has, oh man, one of the swingier abilities I've seen in a card recently. Enhance, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is control of 1, add it to your hand. And it says, if this deck is blocked, ready 1 foundation that has not been ready this combat phase. So this is a card that rewards you for playing a lot of 1-checks, or it rewards you for manipulating your deck so that you have a 1-check on top of it, and it does that in an incredibly potent way. If you get to draw a 1-check attack, you are certainly getting something good, very nice in your hand. And your deck probably doesn't have more than say 12 or 16 1-checks, so you're hovering right around the 20%, like less than 30% range to be able to draw a card off of this. When you do, that's going to give you a big advantage. And the rest of the time, 4 speed mid, an effect when it's blocked, safe keyword. It's just a nice solid little poke that says if your opponent doesn't have their special blocks like Ever Hopeful and Temple already, it might get you some good leverage in the game.
Yeah, not getting reversaled is just really good at any time, especially when you do have to play a mid zone attack because mids can be blocked by anything.
Yeah. So
I mean, yeah, if you even just knowing what the top card of your deck is really good, and I'm sure you mentioned that, and then if it happens to be a one, it is all upside.
yeah, I didn't quite even process this. Is just peek the top card of your deck, and that can give you some advantages in a couple different ways. If you have a enhanced draw card effect, or um, just like something. I mean, Poldemagijin is a good card on the air symbol, and even if you play no 1-checks in your deck at all, this is just a solid ranged attack to combo into your shield rams or something. All right,
Yeah,
it's a good common. Let's hop right into the next card. Speaking of shield ram,
Tengu Dive. This is a 4 difficulty, 1-check attack with a +1 high block, 4 high 6 with Tengu Man symbols, air, life, and water. It's got slam, combo, ranged. If this attack deals damage, add it to your momentum. Whew. And combo E, draw X cards. X equals 4 minus the lowest control on a card in your discard pile. Does anybody remember Piercing Howl?
yeah,
Piercing Howl was fantastic. If it dealt damage, it went straight to your momentum. And then what's really nice about this card is if you put it in your momentum, you can play another one. You can also play a Shield Ram. Both these cards combo off the same thing. So if you have, a ranged and then a Shield Ram and a Tengu Dive, you can go play your ranged move, play your Shield Ram, which is going to clear itself unless they cancel the enhance, draw a card, stun, and do fun things, and then play this guy. And if you have a control 1 in your discard pile, you're going to draw 3 cards,
yep.
which is absolutely ridiculous. And if you've ran your opponent out of town on high blocks already, 6 damage is pretty devastating as well.
Yeah, this is a huge impact for a 4 difficulty attack. And I know the thing I'm sitting here thinking about is how can I off symbol some copies of Merciless Master into my deck to recreate everyone's favorite Piercing Howl interaction, which was Piercing Howl plus Body of Souls. So if you have 2 Tengu dives and you manage to land them, you can start putting the first Tengu dive back on top of your deck while you're comboing the second one. And yeah, you'll pretty much win the game on the spot if you manage to pull that off. Um, yeah, and especially, well, you'll win the game on the spot unless you're not playing Tengu Man and you start checking a chain of ones while you're doing this. But
Or your opponent has infinity high blocks in their hand.
yeah, but this is
Because remember, if your opponent damage, you can no longer combo Tengu dives on it.
yep, you'll have a slam stuck in your card pool in front.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, this card is really, really, really good. I mean, it's got a 1 high block, which is, a really good block. But you got to watch out for that 1-check, and that 1 can sting if you don't have ways to mitigate it.
yeah, this card definitely. I mean, it rewards you for playing controlled values less than 2 or less than 3. I mean, if you have a 3-check in your discard pile, you get a draw card. That's nice. But drawing 4 cards 3 cards is really where you want to be. Drawing 4 cards is nice, but I'm not sure if that's possible. Maybe if I guess if you have 0 cards in your discard pile, do you just get 4 cards?
Ooh, that's a good question for the judges.
All right. So that's a spicy little interaction. We managed to pull that one off, if I'm correct there, which I may not be. But just to be realistic a little bit here, having a 1 check or having 2 checks in your deck is a very real cost, and it is something to weigh carefully in deck building. Just to
One
offer
thing
a
to
voice of reason too.
One thing to consider about the question we just asked is typically in UFS a null value is 0.
Yep.
So if there are
4 minus nothing, so 4.
Yep. All right, moving on to an attack that can mitigate being a 1-check.
All right, so this is Tornado Hold, actually his ultra rare. It's another 4 difficulty 1 control attack with a +1 block, but this time it's a low attack and it's a low block and a low attack. 4 speed low for 6. It's a ranged reversal this time, and it has a pretty cool bit of text here. After it's checked in order to play a foundation, the check gets +2. So this is and then enhance, if this deck was played as a reversal, ready 2 cards in your staging area that have not been readied this combat phase. So this is a very impactful reversal. It can abruptly, completely change the landscape of what's going on in your staging area, either re-readying a defensive piece that was committed due to stun or some other effect, re-readying just a Girl Like Any Other or similar card forgotten that you used to help block, or readying a counterattack with cards like Quick and Precise or Tengu Man himself, suddenly having a much larger reversal out of nowhere. And being able to be a 1-check for Tengu Man's sake, for the sake of Tengu Man's cards, and also still, passing if you play a let's say an Ever Hopeful is your first form of the game. If you check this, you still pass that control check. And what's cool with Tengu Man actually is that you can use, this effect goes off after the kind of response window is decided. So you check a 1 when you check this card, even if you're playing a foundation, so you can trigger Tengu Man and have a 5 that way.
If you really want a 5, I was just about to say that. Yeah, this card is really exciting. I think as a reversal, 4 low for 6, it can be really hard to block, on your own turn. And taking 6 on the dome is never good, especially when you're in the middle of your attack string. Getting to ready 2 cards that have been ready this combat phase, could be powerful cards that your opponent is committed, cards that have offensive and defensive abilities, or just cards that you can use to block with, to pass control checks or blocks later on.
Yeah.
Overall, I really like this card as a reversal.
Yep, and I think it's actually, and now I'm thinking about this just in the context of a Tengu Man deck, it's really great to have a low attack that's got pretty decent speed on it, because you can open up your attack turn, give this +3 speed, +3 damage. That's a 7 low for 9, and if they just take it, they just took 9 damage. You can just chill out and sit on your blocks. You don't have to go crazy. But then if they do decide to block it, in your deck full of Tengu dives, shield rams, very important high attacks, they're probably blocking with a poor block modifier. So let's say they block with a +3 low, that costs 5 foundations. Now they might be opened up to combo your shield ram into Tengu dive kind of stuff and get them with that reversal combo. So
Let's see, what I want to do is I want to play this on my opponent's turn because I like reversals, and then use Tengu Man's ability to make it a 7 low for 9 on their turn that they have to deal with.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, but I think that I really like when you have a card that's multifunctional. Like Skull Barrier is an incredible reversal, incredible block, but on offense it's disappointing. This card is a completely solid role player on offense too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot to like here.
Very, very good card.
All right. What do we got next?
Arrogant and Overconfident. This is a 0 difficulty 5 control check foundation with air, life, and water. After you play this card, if your opponent has at least 3 more foundations than you do, add it to your staging area. This is at common, and Kevin, I adore this card. One of the things that used to happen to me, I used to play like 7 1-checks in a deck that I ran, because I ran both Righteousness and Curse of Corruption, which are both 1-checks. It was awful. And with this card, if you checked a 1 on your first turn, typically that's, bad news bears. Or if you check a 1, as your first form or later on, you can end up really, really behind. With this card, if you do fall behind for some reason, you check badly or your opponent just has a great build turn, this gets you foundations that you can use right away if they have 3 or more foundations than you do.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to like about this card. I really love this kind of catch-up mechanic.
Yeah, because bad checks a lot of times can mean just the end of games. Also, I think this card really lets decks on these symbols get a little more aggressive early on, because if they draw a hand of attacks, they can go in and then, not just be completely boned because they couldn't build on their turn two and instead had to attack, and then their opponent, maybe blocked, took some damage, and then just walled up some more. This is going to really help you get caught back up.
Yep.
There's a lot of situations where I think this card's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think even on top, even piling on top of that, if you start off with that early aggression, put your opponent on the back foot a little bit, and they just build to and try to put up the walls, then you drop some more foundations, and then you can just keep up the pressure even more because you've got these ready foundations coming in hot, and then you can play out your shield rams and stuff, and keep piling it on that way. So it's gonna be a fun card. To rain on the parades again, just a little bit. This is a zero. This is a no block with no ability. It just commits to pass control checks. So it's easy to just say I'm going to build a deck that's all one checks and zero diffs, and then say, oh, it's turn 6. Why aren't I winning? What's going on? None of my cards do anything.
You have no way to push the damage through.
Yeah. So it's something to watch out for anyway. But I like this card. It's a very good common. I'll be happy to have 4 just in my collection in case I need them. All right. We've got Bird of Prey up next. This is a 3 difficulty, 5 control foundation with a +3 mid block. 3 difficulty is kind of out of place in a character who checks 1s all the time, but we'll see what it does. It has first F, draw 1 card. If there are no cards to control of 1 in your discard pile, discard a card. And response destroy, before your draw step, shuffle any number of cards with a control of 1 from your discard pile to your deck. Whew. So once you get this in play, which isn't a given if you're playing 1 checks, that's 3 difficulty. If you do check a 1, it's suddenly just straight up you have +1 hand size at the cost of your first form, which is a really powerful effect. It's not unique, so you can play a lot of these to try to get that online every game. And if you don't have that 1 check, this is a perfectly serviceable card, just improving the quality of your hand. Drawing a card and then discarding a card is a great place to be, honestly. I think the review step is probably my favorite part of the UFS. This is like having extra review steps after you already know the contents of your hand. And the shuffling all your 1 checks into your deck, if you time this well, if you get in the right situation, this completely breaks the game wide open. So imagine you shuffle 4 Tengu Dives into your deck of 2 cards while you have no cards in your hand. Guess what? You're going to draw all 4 Tengu Dives, and your opponent's going to die.
Yeah, this card reminds me quite a bit of an action called Instant Hell Murder that came out years ago, which said after you check a 1, add all the 1s to your hand. Which, I mean, clearly we couldn't do that, this day and age.
Yeah, that is not a real card.
But having the ability, if you time it just right, to put a pile of 1s into your hand, that's really good. And Kevin, I think this card could potentially see play in decks without control 1 cards.
Oh, for sure.
Off of water. Having this as a first form, and I don't have any 1 checks, I'll just discard this balanced fighter and draw a new card instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you play this card with cards like Eton Cells or Capsule Zap or anything else that is a great selective recursion from the graveyard, it can be a great way to just be up a card before you, like if you play an Eton Cells, you don't have any 3s in your discard pile yet. This first step can help you set that up and just grind out a little bit of incremental advantage that way. So yeah, the first form is extremely good. You should not turn your nose up at this card because a lot of its words will be irrelevant to you. It's a very good ability.
Yes.
And speaking of turning up your nose, is the next card the card I think it is? No, it's not.
No. This is King Army Recruit. It's a 2/5 with a +3 high block. E-commit, discard the top 5 cards of your deck. Your attack with a printed control of 1 gets +2 speed. So, this is uncommon. It's got a 3 high block, but what I really like about this card is it gets those 1 checks into your discard pile, because a lot of Tengu Man stuff doesn't turn on until you have control 1 cards in your discard pile.
Yep.
And so getting them there is really important for, the card we just talked about, getting them there for Tengu Dive, just getting those 1 checks there so you can, yeah. So, I think this card is a really good role player for Tengu Man, though I'm not sure it's really going to see a lot of play outside of him.
Yeah, I think that, the number one place you'd see it outside of someone going hard on the 1 check theme who wants it for +2 speed are people who either A, care about getting specific things to the discard pile, like a Bomb Man deck, although Bomb Man doesn't have these symbols, who's just really wants to turn on get as many Atton cells in the discard pile as possible. Maybe a Lilith deck might do this. Um, and then also just people who want to deck themselves to turn on cards like Fool Me Twice or the response on Bird of Prey. It can be really good to be able to manipulate the number of cards remaining in your deck to exploit things that care about either the bottom of your deck or shuffling things into your deck and really maximize those kind of effects. I think one of the really interesting things playing against Tengu Man is going to be trying to time how many control checks and how many cards you allow him to have in his hand to time when he'll be able to cycle or have a very small deck to then maximize Bird of Prey or this kind of effect.
Right. And you'll want to be keeping careful track of what he's doing, manipulating his ones around. If you know he's getting ready to play some sort of plan where he's going to draw a bunch of one checks, putting him in a position where he has to make control checks, or if he has to make control checks because of your abilities, or you launch really big attacks at him that he doesn't want to deal with, stuff like that, so you can force him to cycle as quickly as possible, because cycling, I think, is really where Tengu Man becomes very good.
Yep. Yeah, right around when he's about to cycle. And conversely, as soon as he cycles, a lot of his cards kind of turn off. Tengu Man himself suddenly loses the pump. Tengu Dive suddenly loses its draw effect. And Bird of Prey, obviously, is much less effective when you're shuffling 0 cards in to a 40-card deck. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting little sub-game to see how that turns out. I don't want to say skill testing, because that's kind of a cop-out, but it's something to be aware of. And if you can manage to keep that in mind, how that little sub-game is playing out, it can give you a big advantage.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We've got a very straightforward card, Proud Nose. You don't have to turn your nose up at this one. It's a 1 difficulty, 5 control, +3 mid-block. I really like the nose joke, sorry. It has R flip after you check a 1, recheck. And when you recheck, you're only allowed to recheck once for a given control check. I'm pretty sure that's in the rules. And it's often reminder text, but they left it off here. This is a really straightforward card, really. You just play it and get a little bit of insurance against the catastrophic one-check situation.
Now, this card I could see seeing some play outside of Tengu Man if you are playing one checks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a 1/5, so it's something you're going to be able to play relatively easily. And, if you're really worried about, the 2 of 1 check that you're running in your deck, this can come in and save you. I mean, people have ran Superhero Know-How just because they get to recheck if they check a 3 or less.
Yeah, I can actually
and that's an asset.
I can think of 2 places where this fits in very nicely, and those are AJ Murray's Ferroman deck that he brought to the Rochester PTC that was playing Kablamo. And, this is a lot of, if you're not Tengu Man, like you said, having a 1 difficulty and mitigating 1 checks is right where you want to be. You can place your first form of the game. You're guaranteed to get to your staging area. Then you play a 2 difficulty, and if you check a 3, you'll pass. If you check a 1, you'll be sad, but you got as much as you could. And then the other place is a Turbo Man deck playing Turbo Charge. I think is somewhere you might want to see this. On the life symbol, you can first form, drop this onto your staging area, and then play your first turn without much fear. And then later on, Turbo Charge and Turbo Man BFFs, because you get 2 face downs into your staging area right away.
I could also see maybe somebody running a Kim deck throwing this in off of water.
Hey, you're absolutely right. Didn't think of that one.
I mean, it's a 1 difficulty. Kim decks really a lot of times just want to get as many foundations out as possible. And being on a 1 difficulty, it's easy to get out. And there's only 2 cards Kim's going to check bad on, and one of them is a 1. And I've seen it happen to players where they come at the worst times.
Yeah, and being able to add more copies of the 1 check without derailing everything else that's the deck's got going on can be really huge. The damage output it's an enormous difference between the 1 check and the 2 check and the 3 check. If you're just cycling a Dragon Tail and a Hagetsuzen, that's something like 8 damage per 2 cards and 2 foundations, where if you have a pair of the 1 check, that's 14 damage per 2 cards and 2 foundations. So it's a whole other world of damage output that way. And hell...
Absolutely.
I was going to say something that's not true at all. All right.
Yeah, straightforward card. After you check a 1, try again.
Yeah, so this is a card. If you're interested in what he's doing, you should definitely. If you're interested in any of these things we talked about with one checks, you should definitely try to trade for 4 of these, even if you're not going to get enough boxes. Just have 4 of them naturally, because it is an uncommon. A lot of people won't care about it at all if they're not playing one checks. So, all right.
That wraps up Tengu Man. We're flying tonight. Let's talk about Tomahawk Man. Tomahawk Man is my senpai's design at its very finest, I think.
This is an
No,
excellent
actually,
design.
I lie. Yamato Man's coming up. So Tomahawk Man is a 6-hand size, 28 vitality character with Chaos, Order, and Void. First form, if you have fewer foundations than your opponent, your checks to play cards get +1 for the rest of the turn. And then response. After your opponent makes a check to play a mid-block, the difficulty... I'm sorry. Respond before your opponent makes the check to play a mid-block. The difficulty of that check becomes 7. So, that first form I think is absolutely amazing. We used to play a card back in the old days called Float Like a Butterfly. That was an F commit on a foundation for +1 to your checks for the turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a staple to a lot of decks for a long time because they were able to do more sooner as a result.
Yep.
Because if all of a sudden you're checking 7s, 6s, and 5s, that's really good if you plan to play a lot of moves, especially big moves that turn. And it also helps, if you get behind, getting +1 to all your checks means that maybe you don't need as many foundations to try to assemble a kill turn as you initially had thought. And then his response at first doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense, but if you're playing some big, derpy, slow mid-attack, which a lot of us do sometimes, and your opponent goes to play the Templar, I would much rather have them check against a 7 than a 2.
Yeah, so the
personally.
response is really kind of a different part of the game, honestly. It means that progressive difficulty doesn't matter. It means that speed doesn't matter. It means that block modifiers don't matter. So a card like Templar is relatively worse against this because that +1 block modifier doesn't mean shit. And instead, what matters is your opponent checking 7s. So what's really incredible with Tomahawk Man is a way to deny your opponent foundations. If you can stun them out, that's the dream. If your opponent's committed out except for their character, they need to hard check a 6 to be able to pass a block.
Yeah. Now, that's only for mid-block, so you can play off-zone blocks without this happening.
Yep, but then you're probably taking half damage from Tomahawk Man, so... Because you're probably building Tomahawk Man with all mid attacks to take the most advantage of this. So yeah, I love this design. I think it's really excellent. The big thing with the first F too is that we were talking about denying your opponent resources. If we're playing Tomahawk Man on Void, maybe you want to naturally to deny your opponent resources, you want to play cards like Black Justice or the Napalm Man support that destroys your opponent's foundations. That isn't a good plan necessarily because you might turn off your first F if you end up with more than your opponent.
Mm-hmm. That's a true story.
All right. You want to jump into the next card?
Yep, Unlimited Blades. Go for it.
All right, so this is a 3 difficulty, 4 control action, another ultra rare action, +2 low block, Chaos Order, Void, just like all the Tomahawk Man's cards. It has a first F remove. For the rest of the turn, your attacks get flash. And enhance, if your attack has a printed speed of 2 or less, draw 1 card. After your attack resolves, you may add this card from your card pool to your hand. So, to get it out of the way real quick, that first F remove is kind of a somewhat fringe ability. You might use it if you're worried about Ever Hopeful in Tomahawk Man, your opponent blocking and recurring that thing over and over. Or in some kind of late game scenario where you're trying to push through attacks with his response and skip all the other enhances if you got enough damage. But for the most part, I think it's going to be a relatively uncommon thing to see. That second ability, though, is an outrageous card advantage engine. So if you draw 2 attacks that are you build your deck around slow attacks, this can just start chaining into each other, string out a bunch of attacks, draw a bunch of cards on all of them. If you find a second Unlimited Blades, it's just a 3 difficulty check to be able to 3 difficulty plus progressive to be able to draw a card on each one of those attacks, and really, you kind of just get to go off.
Mm-hmm. See, Kevin Broberg, I'm kind of considering, because I know you said, oh, we're not going to see that form. Now I'm looking at Quickman thinking, well, geez, what moves do I want to, what can I do off of Chaos to make all my moves have flash always?
That is a deck-building trap, Sean O'Brien. You can't think that way. You can't play a character and say, I'm going to draw 4 of this temporary action. I'm going to draw this temporary action before I can start attacking. and things aren't going to work out unless I draw that action. That is a deck building trap.
It is a deck building trap, but it'd be really cool if you could do it because Quickman doesn't get enough love.
He doesn't, but this doesn't solve his problems.
No, he's got problems. That enhance is absolutely off the rails ridiculous. Coupled with Tomahawk Man's form, being able to give +1 to your checks is going to make it easier to keep playing this 3 difficulty action over and over and over again.
Yep, and so if you play any kinds of cards like Head Crush or Kyoten Dochi, or I don't know what else, like Jiroshin, I guess, that you find more attacks using your first attacks, you can really string together some kill turns.
Indeed. And note it says printed speed, so you can use this on multiple copies.
That's dumb. Oh, jeez.
It's amazing.
Wow. Maybe Billy can take advantage of this because he makes multiple copies of things all the time, and a lot of his attacks have 2 printed speed or less. Can you imagine doing this on a like you have to get a bunch of plus control check stuff going on, but can you imagine doing this on a Murakumo?
Wow. Yeah. That seems spicy.
That's so goofy. This card's goofy. I don't like this card. I think it's stupid. Like you're not passing these control checks, but if you are, you're going to get ahead. So I don't know.
Let's move on to a less goofy card, Feather Shot. 4 difficulty, 3 check attack with a +1 mid block, 2 mid for 4 with Chaos Order Void with Breaker 1 and Unique. It says if you have fewer foundations in your opponent, this attack gets Breaker 1 in range. Shut up, Kevin Brover. If you have fewer foundations than your opponent, this attack gets multiple 2. So this card, 2 mid for 4 doesn't seem very good at first, but if you're playing Tomahawk Man and your opponent's blocking mid, they are going to be checking against a 7 every single time. So let's say they have a perfect block. Let's say they have 3 +0 mids in their hand. That effectively is making a bunch of 5-speed mid for 4s, which I think it's not bad. And so I think this card is going to be really good in him, or if you have a way to generate a ton of momentum. Yeah, but this attack seems very susceptible to reversal.
That's true. This card reminds me a lot of a differently flavored Hurricane Upper, and I mean I've lost games of Hurricane Upper plenty of times, multiplying that out. Having a 4 difficulty and 4 damage is just fine. And then the conditional multiple 2 is actually kind of an advantage sometimes because you can't get Kapoken traininged. And yeah, definitely for Tomahawk Man himself, he completely changes the rules of the game and makes it so that speed isn't a thing anymore, only damage and your opponent's staging area. So having 4 damage over 3 attack, 12 damage spread out over 3 attack cards is quite potent in him because it's really hard to block 3 times, and that damage is going to sneak through. For everyone else, it's a role player if you happen to be able to generate that much momentum. And just +1 mid block Breaker 1 is really great too. Like it's a 3 check. It's a fun card to have in your deck.
Mm-hmm. That's really all I got for this one.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward card. All right, let's talk about Silver Tomahawk. So I really like the design of this one. It's a 3 difficulty, 3 control, +3 high block, 0 speed mid for 5 damage, and it says it's a ranged weapon, and it says enhance if you have fewer foundations than your opponent. This attack gets stunned 2, and response before your opponent makes a check to completely block this attack with a mid block, the difficulty of that check becomes 5. So this card really takes Tomahawk Man's theme and transplants it to anyone else who wants to play with it. So this is a small attack. It's got low printed speed, but it gets stunned, which is really where you're going to be with Tomahawk Man, and then it forces your opponent to do his gimmick of blocking at a set difficulty rather than the speed plus progressive plus block modifier. In Tomahawk Man, I think it's incredible because you should pretty much always be getting the stun 2, and then he turns into a 3-speed 5 damage output, and it's just an incredible card to fill in the middle of your attack string. On order, you can pump the shit out of it with Mega Man too. So if you can get your opponent in a position where, let's say they committed their character, you can force them to hit their character, or you use Secret History to commit their character, then they only have 2 foundations ready, and you're playing your attack string, and you activate a bunch of copies of Blue Bomber to give your next ranged +4 damage, Then you drop this at the end of the string, uh, stun their last two foundations out, and have stacked up, let's say, +8 damage. That's a game, boys. That's 13. That's unblockable too. So could be a really big game there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. With 3 difficulty, sticking this on the end of an attack string is going to be really good if your opponent can't pass a 5 at that time.
Yep.
Or if they... Plus, you always have the option with Tomahawk Man or his card that if their block is going to be more difficult than 7 or 5, you can just let them block normally. It's a response. You don't have to do it.
Yep, you actually don't even have to choose until they decide to make the check, until they just like they put the card in their card pool and are going to make the control check. So if your opponent tries to get you with like a I don't know, pick on someone your own size, a +4 block, you can just say, yeah, sure, pass that check. And I think this card could actually breathe some life into a deck we haven't seen very much of, which is Order Pharaoh Man. He turns it into a 6 difficulty to block effectively.
Oh, yeah, because your checks get -1.
And that stun 2 can really take away options from your opponent. And it has the magic 2 keywords for Rain Flush. So
Ranged and weapon.
Yep.
Yeah, this card checks a lot of boxes for me, honestly.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So, all right, moving on.
Tomahawk Slam. This is a 2 difficulty attack, Kevin Broberg. 2 difficulty 3 check with a +3 mid block, 1 mid for 3 slam. Discard momentum. This attack it's +4 damage.
Hey ho.
So you're gonna see this in your draft pods quite frequently. It is a common at 1 speed, 3 damage. It doesn't seem very good on paper, but in Tomahawk Man, this card's really, really good. Or if you don't think your opponent has any blocks, this card could be for 7 damage. I don't see this card really doing anything outside of Tomahawk Man because he can make you block against a 7 on a 2-diff.
Yeah, in Constructed, I think that you need to have a compelling reason to be interested in this card, and Tomahawk Man is one such compelling reason. Maybe there's some cards where slams matter on these symbols. Maybe we want to transform and find a 7 damage attack sometimes, and we expect to have our opponent discarded their hand by that time. I think this card is absolutely incredible in draft. Because there aren't cards like Templar. There aren't cards that say, hey, please block with me. And this card almost demands a block at such a small cost.
Yeah.
So sometimes your opponent will have their hand full of these off-zone blocks because just a lot of good attacks happen to have off-zone blocks. And you'll just catch them sleeping. They'll have to block with their attack, and they'll still take 4 damage. And that's just a huge swing.
Yeah, the struggle though with limited is it's difficult to get the momentum for the +4 damage.
No, you just attack them.
That's true. Usually, actually, I lied. The difficulty in limited is finding a way to spend your momentum.
Yep.
And at common, this is a pretty good way to get that damage in.
Yeah, I'm just imagining playing Tomahawk Man and going first, just turn 1, going second, hitting the first form button, playing a couple foundations, and then dropping a pair of these at the end of the string. Just here's 6 damage, getting on the board. Hard to stop
I really like the art on this one. They're having a struggle snuggle. One of them's having a good time, the other one is not.
Yeah, there's an awfully sharp axe right next to Mega Man's face there too.
Oh man, Tomahawk Man's super great. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I think he's one of the cooler designs, and I'm really impressed with him. He just changes the rules of the game and does it in such a fascinating way. And I think he's clearly, I mean, he demands attention. Like he's very good, I think, on paper. He seems like he could be very good anyway. I'm gonna
built for the tournament.
Yep, so this is a 2 difficulty, 5 control, +3 high block, unique foundation with Tomahawk Man symbols. It has enhance your attack with 2 or less speed gets stun 1, and response discard 1 card. After your attack with 2 or less speed is not blocked, draw 1 card. Wow, so this is an absolutely incredible card for Tomahawk Man. Building your own, I guess this is Ben Shoemaker's response to discard a card and then draw a card. That's really like a miniature Skullman effect, a Deforester kind of effect. Being able to loot, or an Ultimate Undead, is extremely potent on every attack that manages to sneak through. And then giving your attack stun 1. Stun is completely incredible with Tomahawk Man. You should look everywhere you can find for it. I would almost consider playing 4 of this card in Tomahawk Man because once you get the first one in play, it helps you get rid of the extras, and the stun one can be that important.
And don't forget, off of Chaos, you can discard your Balanced Fighter to the second ability.
Heyo.
Yo, Balanced Fighter.
Yeah,
I like this card a lot. So far, I haven't really disliked any cards in Tomahawk Band support. Anytime he can get stun one is really good for him, just like you said. And getting to draw a card, and I think the response after not blocked, I think is one of the better times to draw cards. You don't
yep,
have to commit to getting rid of something during your enhanced step when you don't know what's going to happen yet. At this point, you already know that your opponent's going to take some damage, so you may be able to make a decision as to whether or not you don't want to keep this card to build it for later on the turn to have more options, to block or for my next turn, or do I want to ship it away and try to get another attack?
yep. And thinking back to a conversation we've had recently, the one thing that this response doesn't have information on yet is if your opponent's going to play dodge. So it triggers after they either fail or decline to block, but dodge happens during the damage step, so they might be able to still have one last trick up their sleeve.
Yeah, dodge is a card you got to watch out for.
All right. Next
I think
up,
that's it on this card.
Clear Cutter.
Next up is Clear Cutter, a 1/4 foundation with no block, with Chaos, Order, and Void. While this card is in your card pool, checks to play attacks get +1, and checks to play blocks get -1. And it has form, add this card to your card pool. So I really like this card as, something that you might put in your deck, especially in limited to, fill out that one check slot. Making your attacks easier to play is really good. So while this card's in your card pool, you ignore when you're playing attacks, it doesn't really count towards progressive difficulty because you're going to get +1 to your check to get around it. And then your opponent's checks to make blocks are going to get -1, so it's going to be harder for them to block. So it's like having like a mini Hanya for, just having this in your card pool.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly a Hanya, really. God, I didn't even think of Hanya with this character, which actually on offense it does nothing because block modifiers don't matter to Tomahawk Man. So it's pretty cool there that this gets around that. Yeah, I like this card a lot. It's a very solid, it's a spam card. You put it in your deck to spam out, and then once you do, you get +1 speed that actually counts as speed even for Tomahawk Man. Once you decide to go in for an attack turn, I can imagine it breathing a little bit of life and constructed into like Chaos Yellow Devil or something.
Yeah, I was just looking up Yellow Devil to see if it matched any symbols with him.
Yep.
Because Yellow Devil is going to give it stun 1 for each copy of it in your card pool. And if your checks are going to get around that, which Yellow Devil kind of lets you do anyhow, but, giving your opponent's blocks -1, is really good if they're stunning and your attacks are getting more damage.
You're really getting them on both ends at that point, and so it's going to be pretty tricky to block real quick at that point. I'm definitely, now that we're talking about this out loud, I realize you can play Snowboarding Enthusiast and tutor up a bunch of copies of this in Yellow Devil. And that's really fun because I love that card.
Card is super good. After your mid deals damage, getting cards back from your discard piles, really good. And I think frequently Tomahawk Man's mids are going to do damage.
Yep. And then once you do, you start to be able to snowballing out of control with tutoring up Clear Cutters. So it's good times. All right. We got next. We got
Incredible range.
This is a 2 difficulty, 5 control, +3 low block, Tomahawk Man Foundation. With enhanced flip, your range attack gets +2 damage and -2 speed. And response once per turn. After your opponent makes a check against a difficulty of 7 or more, draw 1 card and discard 1 card. So the first ability is pretty straightforward. If you're Tomahawk Man, you get to add 2 damage. If your opponent has no cards in their hand, you get to add 2 damage. As long as you're playing ranged attacks. It's a very solid effect. I think you might even see this in characters like Nightman or Swordman, just as if they play attacks that are both ranged and weapon. Really just solid little effect to get a bit more damage out in a kind of a mathing people out situation. And the responsibility lets you just increase your card quality a little bit as long as your opponent's making these hard checks. As Tomahawk Man, if they ever try to block anything, there you go. You can just trigger all of these in your staging area and make your hand a whole lot better. And if they decline to ever block, well, then you're landing free hits. It's pretty cool that you can also do this on defense if your hand is bad and your opponent's playing some high difficulty cards like Dragon Cannon or Pharaoh Wave or something like that, as with at least 1 progressive difficulty. Or if you just hit them with some big breakers, That difficulty
Yeah.
adds up that way.
Yeah, I really like this card on defense because there's a lot of times where your opponent might be making checks against difficulty of 7 or more. If it's getting deep in their attack turn,
Hmm.
and if they're playing a 4 difficulty move with 3 cards in their card pool already, that's a 7.
Yep. Actually,
And
and come to think of it, I think that actually one card that really likes this, one really nice combo with this, is Leaf Shield. It's got Breaker, and it's a little range attack that usually doesn't get through on speed anyway. So beefing it up a little bit can have a lot of mileage.
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Solar powered.
Oh, this card's great.
Solar powered. 3 difficulty, 5 control check, +3 mid block, rare foundation with Chaos, Order, and Void. Your mid attack gets +1 damage. And then F destroy. Look at the top card of your deck. Add it to your hand or to your momentum. This card, I think, is, I like it, but it's the 3 difficulty kind of turns me off to it. There are other cards in the format right now that give your mid attacks damage that aren't on a 3 difficulty. I don't know how many of these you're going to really want to play. But the F destroy not being unique is really good. That's kind of the upside to it. Is F destroy either draw a card or add it to your momentum. Your choice.
Yep.
Which it's 2 fantastic modes.
Yeah, and the great thing is that it's card selection. So if you have a foundation that's not going to do very much, you just stick it in your momentum, and then you get to use whatever great momentum things you've got going on. But if it's a good attack, if it's like the right attack for the situation, or maybe you're going to get the momentum for a multiple, and it's going to be like a 2 mid 4 multiple, but instead you find a silver tomahawk, that's going to be a much better attack, and so you'll just take the attack and play it. Yeah, I think this is a really solid card.
Yeah, I just wish it wasn't 3 difficulty.
Yeah,
I think I would like it. I'd like it better on a 2, but I mean, who wouldn't?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it couldn't be this good on a 2.
No,
Like being, other cards that are similar to this, where you can get a fast momentum. Not only, I mean, they're like locked in. They're cards like Reactive Style or Strength of Tail, and you don't get nearly as much flexibility as drawing your hand and then playing a form whenever you want. And plus, it adds damage in the meantime. So I think it's a fairly balanced 3 diff.
fair enough. Fair enough.
All right. Oh boy. All right. Next up, we've got Turbo Man, a 7 hand size, 20 vitality character, normal stats, all life and void. He has first F. Both players may add 1 foundation they could normally play from their hand to their staging area, and commit 1 foundation. If the committed foundation was added to your staging area this turn, your attack gets 2 damage and 2 speed. So this is a combo character. You give your opponent the ability to add a foundation, and that's kind of the hidden cost here. His abilities are close to free, but not quite. But that's the hidden cost. Your opponent gets some extra build. They get to cheat things in as well as you. So 3 diff foundations are better against Turbo Man than usual. And in exchange, you get to set up combos with things like DeForester much more quickly, things like Ladies Man or Champion of Southtown much more quickly with these kind of hasty foundations cheating straight into the staging area. And then the enhanced commit 1 foundation is okay. It's fine if you're committing foundations you cheated in with his ability, but where it really pays you off is when you're using things like Transform, which I guess actually we haven't talked about yet, Deforester, Spiders and Dragons, M4 Vapor Cannon, any of these kinds of effects to cheat fast foundations into your staging area in the same turn, and then start going off with this pretty sizable speed and damage bonus.
Yeah, and Turbo Man is going to have access to, quite a few cards that are difficult. He can get cards like Psychedelic Dream World into play really easily. That's a 5 difficulty card, which normally you'd want to be playing. That's an attack difficulty. Arachnophobia gets in at 4 difficulty. Crime Fighter, Terrifying Opponent, which I don't think anybody's ever played that card. But if they print more high difficult foundations in the future, this is going to be the guy to cram them into play.
Yep.
Or maybe if you're running 1 checks and you do have a 3 diff in your hand, getting that guaranteed into your staging area is really good, so you don't have to have that temptation to try to play something on a 3 when you could possibly fail.
Yeah, and I know I've seen life decks before that, go first and drop 2 copies of Summer Heat and then fail their 3rd card. Turbo Man gives you, he can really run away from it with the game if he draws a couple copies of Summer Heat and gets this build really rolling in the early games, early turns, and he can also just off symbol. That first F does. I mean, it says normally play, but you have nothing in your card pool yet, so you can maybe splash some perfect accuracies in your life deck, or play unquestionable loyalty in your all deck. I don't know. I'm making these up, but
Yeah, I mean his ability is both really good, and his E is going to be more relevant than people may think at first because a lot of his cards are going to get him free foundations into his staging area.
yeah. So that's really the key to look for is can you build a Turbo Man deck that does more than just what he says on the box? Because cheating in a Psychedelic Dream World is good. It's solid. It progresses the game in your favor. But if you can make all of your pieces work together, you can really build an engine and go off to the races.
That's funny because he's a car. All right.
Thank you.
Transform is his action. It's a rare action, so a nice break from the ultra rares. It's a 3 difficulty 4 check with a +2 high block. So it says form. Add 1 slam attack with a difficulty of 4 or less from your discard pile to your hand. The next time you play a copy of that attack this turn, add this card to your staging area face down. So, you search out your best slam in your deck, which could be possibly one of his cards coming up. And then once you play it, put this in your staging area face down, you get a free foundation out of it, which is going to be really important because one of the cards we talk about here in a bit is going to keep track of, is going to check to see if you've been keeping track of how many foundations you've gotten for free this turn.
Yep.
And then the card has a second ability, R remove. After your opponent adds a foundation to their staging area during the combat phase, remove it from the game. So, this card kind of helps mitigate maybe if you use your first form and your opponent puts something into play that's absolutely devastating to, what you plan to do. You can get that right out of there right away. And because it's got remove costs, it removes itself from progressive difficulty. Both abilities, actually, remove themselves from progressive difficulty eventually. With this one, if your opponent does something with like Ever Hopeful, bringing that down in the middle of the turn and messing you up, this card can get rid of that too. So
yeah, and
surprise cards really get hurt by this.
Yeah, and not coincidentally, Turbo Man is a surprise character. So I think that a lot of games involving Turbo Man will come down to who draws transforms and who uses them the best, who can pick off their opponent's staging area, who can pick apart their opponent's game plan really by using transform at the right time versus the proactive slam mode. I think this card is incredibly good. I've name dropped it twice already before we even talked about it. I mean, even just like the base rate on this card is it's a 4-check attack. Because you add a slam, and there are actually plenty of good slams now. Like slam was kind of a second-class keyword for a hot minute, but now on Life and Void or on Life and All, there's an A tier finisher. There's a powerful 3 slam that adds with cards in your card pool. There's on both All and Void, there are slams that draw you a card when you play them. There's plenty to do with this card, and the response is one of the most efficient ways to disrupt Turbo Man, to disrupt Ever Hopeful, to disrupt itself that we've seen printed so far. So I think this is going to be an incredibly important card in the upcoming format.
Yeah, and the slams, especially in these symbols, you got a lot of really good company there.
Yep.
Magnet Slam, I don't think we mentioned, which your opponent almost always takes damage off a Magnet Slam.
Yep.
You can tutor up. I'm sorry, 1 second here. You can tutor up a lot of J Talbane stuff. You got a few cards from the Indian set that have the slam keyword. Plus, you get to dial up Crash Drive, Tengu Dive, Napalm Slam, Gyro Crusher.
I didn't realize this could tutor for Tengu Dives. Yeah, this is a 4-check card that gets you a 1-check card. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think that's a pretty good return.
Yeah, Sean.
But make sure it is
take these all out of the store because they're in our collection now. We're not selling this.
This card's so good. Everybody should pre-order their copies of this and all cards from the set that they would like to buy at rochesterccg.com.
Yeah, make sure you do it fast because I'm gonna start buying them out from you. All right.
A+, I'll take it.
Let's go to the next one. All right, so this is a much less absurd card. This is called Crash. Oh, geez, I zoomed it in. Sorry. This is Crash Drive, a 4 difficulty, 3 control, +2 low block attack. It's a 5 mid for 3 slam with Reversal and Desperation 3 as well. It's got Turbo Man symbols. And it has Enhanced, discard 1 momentum. If this deck deals damage, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. Add 1 foundation you could normally play among them to your staging area and discard the rest. So this is a really fun inversion of a card that I've liked a lot, which is Etoile Filante out of, what's her name, Elizabeth's support, where it's discard momentum. It's a 5-speed mid for 3 reversal, and if it hits when you discard momentum, you remove one of your opponent's foundations from the game. So instead, this lets you build instead of taking away from your opponent, it lets you get ahead of them by building more of your own stuff. And it's got some conditions on it. You've got to deal damage, you got to have a momentum. But if you can satisfy that, it can be a really powerful effect to help you complete any kind of 2-card combos or to find the best piece for the current situation off the top of your deck. And if you can turn it on with Turbo Man, it's a 7-speed mid, pretty hard to block. And yeah, Desperation 3 reversals are nice.
Yeah, I think this card could potentially see play outside of Turbo Man as well. Any deck that's really good at reversing and can really pack on the speed and make it so your opponent just can't block. I mean, getting free foundations is always the best.
You know who loves this card is John Talbane.
He likes this card a lot.
His Talbane reversals are great. Talbane and punches, kicks, and slams are great. Talbane and card advantage is great. So checks a lot of boxes.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, overall, I really like this card. It's like the anti-Etoile Filante. Right, sometimes they take it, this time it giveth.
All right, let's move on to the next one, and it'll probably be the last card for the night because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Okay, so this card is the bonkerest card ever, maybe. So this is Scorch Wheel. 5 difficulty, 2 check, 4 high for 7 with a +2 mid block. It's ranged. Attacks in your card pool do not count towards the progressive difficulty to play this card. So if you're only playing attacks, you'll only ever play this on a 5 difficulty. And then Gender Male Enhance. Draw a card for each foundation that has been added to your staging area this turn. So when I look at this card, the first thing I think of is how do I build the Assets Turbo Man deck? Because if I have 2 assets in my staging area and I use Tamayose, it says, Scorch Wheel says I draw 2 cards. If I use Tamayose twice, I get to draw 4 cards. And then if I'm playing an assets deck, I can use Deforester, which destroys my face downs. If it's an action, if it's a non-foundation, I get draw a card, and then I get a new foundation in my staging area for free. And so I'm trying to figure out how can I draw 14 cards in a turn.
14 is a low number because if you happen to find another Scorch Wheel, it's on a 5 difficulty because you have no progressive. And every time you Deforester, it adds 1 to the next Scorch Wheel. Every time you find a Tamayose, that adds 2 more to the next Scorch Wheel. And then once you draw a Scorch Wheel off of a Scorch Wheel, well, odds are pretty good you'll find a 3rd Scorch Wheel on that second one. And then you'll cycle your deck because you're not a complete luck deck. You did check one of those Scorch Wheels earlier. And after you finish cycling, if it's still in your deck, you will probably draw the 4th Scorch Wheel using the 3rd one.
And if for some reason you have not killed your opponent yet with your 6 high for 9s, off the life symbol, you may have drawn a Zing or 2. And those also ignore progressive difficulty. I guess you're right. Off of all 2. And if you have 5 cards in your card pool already, Zing also ignores progressive difficulty. And you can just deal potato damage to your opponent that turn.
And on top of all this, the aforementioned all-in life symbols can also put 2 copies of Scorch Wheel on the bottom of their deck with Fool Me Twice. Or shuffle copies of Scorch Wheel into their deck using, what's the card? Seeking Information.
This card is incredibly scary. It's incredibly powerful. Right now, I think it's like a $25 card right now on RochesterCCG.com, and I think this card demands that price all day because of what it can do.
Yeah, this is one of the largest printed attacks we've seen in this set. Is a 7 damage 4-speed high. That's a very strong attack. 7 damage is something you gotta sit and pay attention to. We've seen cards like Concussion Blast is a 4-speed high for 8, which basically does nothing. It clears stuff from the card pool and it has flash. That's a valid and competitive. It's not quite a staple, but it's a competitive card. And this card has 1 less damage, ignores attacks preceding it, and then draws a million cards if you can get your engine going. Um, yeah, I am. I expect to get paired with people, and they've built their deck in such a way that they will never lose on like turn 3 or 4 when they start scorch wheeling me. And like trading, like if you have caught red-handed or revoke, you can kind of sorta tread water, but this is still a 7 damage attack that skips the progressive difficulty for everything before it. So you're still going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, you cancel their gender veil enhance, and hopefully they don't have another one in their hand. Because knowing UFS players, knowing the people who play at the highest level, they're going to be waiting until they have 2 or 3 of these puppies in their hand, and then they're just going to put you 10 feet in the ground.
Yeah.
And there's just going to be nothing you can do. And with a +2 mid block, it's not the worst thing to hold on to. You can still block with it. I think this card really could have used not to have that block.
Yeah, I would have felt a little bit better if it made you that much more vulnerable. Like a +2 block is a poor block, but it's much easier to put your opponent to deal exactly lethal damage than it is to deal lethal damage through a +2 mid block. And yeah, if your opponent isn't blocking at all because they're just sitting on the perfect hand they're going to destroy you with, even if you force them to block with 1 Scorch Wheel but they're sitting on 2, they're still going to be a favorite to kill you if they have Scorch Wheel, Tamiose. That's still going to kill you on most of their draws next turn. So you have to really go in to force them to be able to block with that. And they just have the option instead of just being dead when you present lethal damage. So.
Yeah, watch out for this card. This card is absolutely insane.
Yep. So on that note, get ready to destroy what's best in life is to drive your opponents before you, draw 14 cards, and hear the lamentations of their women. So get your engines ready and buy some Scorch Wheels and get ready to crush people.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I cannot hear you over that power Corvette running right now. It's.
Well, you can put 4 wheels on your car. You got to have a good engine inside of it, and you got to have a good driver behind the steering wheel, and then you'll really have something nice. While everyone else is out here being a cat and kicking people, you can drive a literal car through the opposition, and its name is the Power Corvette.
So we'll see everybody tomorrow at actually let's start we'll start at the same time tomorrow, 8:30 tomorrow night, same time, same channel. We're gonna wrap this up. We got 12 cards left, and that means hopefully we'll have some time to talk about the news and talk about upcoming pre-release events and PTCs. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night, same time, same channel. Have a good one.
Good night.